tonight. Will a long-awaited flood protection scheme for the Taieri end before it even begins? Some tough talk on the Dunedin Rates issue from Brockville residents. And we meet a modern wandering minstrel. Good evening. The final nail in the coffin of the $15 million Lower Taieri flood protection scheme is expected to be hammered home by the Otago Catchment Board on Friday.
It's a scheme that's been 10 years in the making, and now the majority of farmers say they don't want it because they can't afford to pay their share. But local MP Clive Mathewson has made a last-minute plea for the scheme to go ahead as planned. The aim of the scheme was to prevent this happening again, floods that have devastated farms, roads and services and cost the taxpayer millions of dollars to help fix. The Catchment Board's solution to the flood problem was announced to farmers in May this year, but was greeted with a lack of enthusiasm by some.
It'll make it tough. I know it'll make it damn tough on us. I think this will be the straw which could break some of them.
And in the end, about 70% of those who would pay for the scheme have decided they can't afford it. The government had agreed to pay more than half of the first $7 million stage. Alternatives have been explored in the last few months, but without ratepayer support, the Catchment Board seems to have little choice but to cancel the scheme at its meeting on Friday.
Long term, no doubt, the comprehensive scheme gave enhanced flood protection and in particular for a chunk of the area gave greatly improved drainage. Those two things together, long term, provide for improved production from the farm, improved capital gain on the farm, improved saleability with that capital gain, and notably an improved ability to diversify or intensify the farming operations that are there. Now all those things of course occur slowly in time, but they were all opportunities afforded by the comprehensive scheme. They are of course forgone if you don't have the scheme.
He suggests some work will be done along the Lower Taieri, but only as ratepayers can afford to pay for it. That presents a problem for the Catchment Board.
If a piecemeal approach is adopted, there is a possibility that you can do some works on one side or the other of the river that, if they are done in isolation, will detrimentally affect other people in the community, usually on the other side of the river.
The Taieri farmers may also have left themselves open to a lack of sympathy from government the next time they're hit by a big flood. The question is, if the farmers aren't prepared to pay for their own protection scheme, how keen will the government be to get them back on their feet next time?
I can't speak for future governments, and I don't know when the next flood's going to happen, but I think that any future government faced by a request for a lot of taxpayer funds would really have to ask the question, look, we offered you 70% subsidy in the past and you didn't pick up the smaller amount of cost yourselves, so I think they'd have to look at it carefully.
But if you were a farmer on the Taieri, in this present economic situation, wouldn't you be prepared to take the chances with a flood as opposed to paying for a scheme that might just put you into some sort of financial trouble?
Oh, look, I understand the rural situation, but it's almost an offer that can't be refused, I believe. We're all looking for work in our region, and I certainly am. And here's a scheme which is not a make-work scheme. It's going to have a rate of return of about 20%. It's a real economic investment. Now, the government's putting up 45%. The farmers are being asked for 40%. Out of that, they get increased productivity. They don't have the risk of a flood. The value of their properties goes up. And although I understand their position, it's almost an offer that can't be refused. And from the point of view of the region and the work that would be created, I mean, here's an investment that can be made in our region, and the government's saying we're going to put in quite a big chunk of the money. Now, I'd be immensely disappointed if this scheme doesn't proceed.
But for some farmers, the difference in rates might mean the difference between continuing farming and having to sell up.
Well, I mean, I can't answer that, but I honestly doubt that's the case. And the point is, it's an investment. It's an investment by them in their future productivity. And as I said, the value of their properties will go up. And I just have to repeat, I'll be very disappointed. I've heard that there's a group of people going around the Taieri lobbying against it. Now, from the point of view of the region, and indeed from the point of view of those farmers, I really hope it proceeds.
Clive Mathewson talking with Mark Price. 3 Dunedin city councillors got a hard time from Brockville residents last night when they appeared at a public meeting about rates. The meeting voted unanimously for a change away from the present capital value system, in spite of councillors' attempts to convince them it's what's best for the city. Kim Haring reports.
Elizabeth Hannon started off the meeting with an attempt to explain the different rate systems and what they could mean to the people of Brockville. But it was obvious that this crowd was at best going to be inattentive.
It's been said that we do not...
At worst, the meeting became a shouting match.
If you're going to abuse me, then I'm not abusing you, Mr. Prime. Which is why we moved the capital value motion, which is why we've consistently opposed uniform annual charges, because they compress the scale and mean that the people at the bottom, the people who were asking questions here before, end up subsidising the welfare.
That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing now.
I know people on the peninsula that paid $31 in rate last year. They pay now $900. And the old man's dead. The lady told me the old man's dead. Now I'm on my own. I don't know how I do it. Have you realised what you've done? I've lived in the same house for 35 years. I need a goat to get out where I live. And my rate was only $182 last year. I don't mind my rate going up. I never complain. But now, $747 and I'm retired. You try that. And there's a lot of people in Dunedin who's in the same boat as me. I don't think this council would know what they've done to the old people of the city. There's no compensation for them, or the poor people.
Some people see uniform annual charges or a flat tax for services received as the answer to the rates problem, but Louise Rosson isn't in favour of them.
We imagine uniform annual charges as going to the well with a bucket of water, and we're all going to get a bucket of water, therefore we should all pay the same. And that story is given often by those who support uniform annual charges, and I say rubbish, because some of us drive to the well, some of us wear good shoes, and some of us go barefooted.
But these Brockville people were not swayed by the councillors' arguments. When asked to vote on a return to land value, they were unanimous.
We'll have a show of hands, please. Against?
The latest population figures show a further decrease in most areas of Otago and Southland. About 1,000 fewer people live in the two provinces now compared to 1986. Jim Mora has the figures.
Dunedin City's lost about 160 people over the past 2 years. The population's now down to 76,800. Invercargill's lost more. Its population's dropped by 600 to about 47,500. Oamaru's lost 160 people too. The population's now 12,500. Balclutha has shed 110 citizens. And Gore, 160. On the other hand, Alexandra is growing, along with Cromwell and Arrowtown. Alex now has a population of 4,960. And the Queenstown Lakes District is the fastest growing region in Otago and Southland. There are now nearly 800 more people living in and around the resorts. The country's smallest borough is getting smaller. Naseby has lost 3 people in the last 2 years. Another Naseby statistic is that as well as being the smallest borough at the highest altitude, it's now the most indebted area of the country per head of population. That isn't because Naseby people are spendthrifts, it's due to the cost of the borough's water supply scheme in 1982.
We're all familiar with tales of instant stardom in the music business, but there's a British musician in Dunedin at the moment who's taken a different path. For 10 years, he's lived the life of a wandering minstrel, and his survival techniques may offer some tips for locals looking for a life on the road.
I live in an ambulance back in England, and as I was living in Liverpool about 2 years ago, someone came up to me and said, I have an ambulance too, which you could buy from me. And he suggested it was only a very small amount of money, so I bought it and repaired it and sold it for the ticket to get out there. And then from here I've been working my way, as I go, and earning a bit playing, doing shows, and then going on to the next place and trying to find what to do then. Arriving without knowing virtually not knowing anything about the system, and I go first to music outlets, music venues, to places that know where you can actually get accessible playing in the town, and then you go to see if you can play there. And once you get that, you meet other musicians who know of other places, or if you can't find that way, you go to music shops, and most of those know places to go to play, or citizen advice bureaus, etc. I've been trying to get a record contract for years, and I decided that it was pointless trying to bash your way at the doors, because they're not going to let you in unless you have the whole thing set, ready to be produced. You know, nowadays you have to have a major manager and an agent with the whole thing finished, like taped from a studio with a video, and then the record company will say, well, we'll maybe release it now, and then they'll put all the publicity into it. But if you're on the street, like someone like me, you're so far away from it that there's no way that they would ever be interested in you. And so I decided to go completely around the wall and go straight to the television stations and straight to the radio stations and say, this is what I've written, and I've done television before. Why can't I do it on your station? And I think I've done about 7 shows now this year, right the way across the world. It's much more exciting than busking on the street, because you've got the ability to get out to millions of people, and to do that I think is a pretty for a musician to get his music out to that many people without having to sign contracts, without having to pander to anybody's views of fashion and fad. I think it's a pretty good idea, really.
Can you make a good living there?
Oh, I don't know. No, I'm starving most of the time.
Alan Baddock reporting there. Nice music and a nice lifestyle too. Cool around the south today. A look at the 3 o'clock temperatures. Invercargill predicting a high for you tomorrow of 10 degrees. In Dunedin, 8 degrees. The high today recorded in Kura of 11. The low today of